Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode in the series, Dawah Ilallah, as we use comparative sciences to find a good way or recommended way in bringing people to submit to Allah. It's not the only way, it's a science. As we know with sciences evolve and change with the order of the day. So the science that we may have learned when I was at school is probably different to what you're learning at school. The sciences of comparative religion continuously evolve. They are not written in stone. We have to continuously update the information. As of when this was recorded, the information was correct. However, it may have changed since then. So it's up to you to do the research. And we're looking at one of those religions in the world that changes its theology to suit itself every year, literally. Don't worry, they're not the only religion in the world to do that. Catholicism does it as well, and most other religions in the world. But the Jehovah's Witnesses, which we're looking at, are the ones that get caught for doing it. And they've actually got a theology, a doctrine, which is called progressive doctrine, which allows them to change anything whenever they feel like it. We've been looking at some of the beliefs and some of the doctrines that Jehovah's Witnesses hold to. And now we're going to look at how they deal with chastisement. In other words, how they discipline one another. If somebody, say for instance in the Jehovah's Witness movement, had to do something that needed to be disciplined. Some churches, they have something called excommunication. In other words, you may have been a born-again Christian, you may have committed a sin or done something so bad that they kick you out of the church. Can you believe it? They actually kick people out of the churches. In this modern day and age, you would think that anything would be acceptable. And so sometimes when people are kicked out of a certain church, they just go to another church where it's acceptable. So in this modern day and age, there are a few Christian churches that still practice correction or actually discipline their congregation one way or the other. When a baptized member of the Jehovah's Witness organization is accused of committing a serious sin, then he will be brought before the elders of the congregation. These are the senior members, not necessarily older in age, but older in wisdom. And so the person who is being brought there for whatever misconduct he has performed or been involved in will have to answer to the questions that are asked him regarding the church doctrine. So they'll say, is it not according to church doctrine that you shouldn't be doing this? Or is it not according to the Watchtower Society's doctrine that you should not have done this? Most of the time, it's when a sexual immoral act has taken place. So perhaps somebody who has been involved in molesting a child, or perhaps they've been involved in rape, or even homosexuality, or lesbianism, whatever it is, or bisexuality, whatever it is. Normally it has to do with that issue, and that would be a serious enough case. If you've been involved in other cases, hardly ever will they actually bring a person forward to have discussions. As the years have gone by, they have become more lenient, unfortunately. We found that in the early years they were very, very strict, and they would disfellowship a person. That's the term that they use, the internal terminology, disfellowship. Fellowship is coming together. Disfellowship is when you are broken away. And it would form what was called a shunning. They would shun the person from the community if they were caught for that. Today, you can do whatever you want, really, in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Even if you're caught for child molestation and all that, they will just give you more and more time. But the old days, say 10 years ago, 20 years ago in the old days, in Christian terms, that's eons ago, they were far more strict on these type of policies. So what will happen is they would basically discommunicate you from the community for a period of time. Doesn't always mean forever and ever. But they are more scared to do that these days because people just move over to another church. So if you get kicked out of the Jehovah's Witnesses, suddenly you find doctrinal problems with the Jehovah's Witnesses. Obviously when you get kicked out, then only do you have revelations that the church might be wrong. And so disgruntled members will simply move over to one that is closely related to what they believe. And the obvious choice when you're leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses is the Seventh-day Adventists. And the obvious choice when you get kicked out of the Seventh-day Adventists is Jehovah's Witnesses because they're almost the same religion. Even though the Seventh-day Adventists are more accepted as a Protestant denomination. because they changed certain beliefs, like they miraculously, mysteriously chose to believe in the Trinity, which they never believed in the early days. But we'll get to the Seventh-day Adventists later. So a Jehovah's Witness normally has very few options available to him when he gets kicked out of the Kingdom Hall or out of the Jehovah's Witness movement. He can either move over to the Seventh-day Adventists, or he can join the Mormons, or he just becomes an atheist. Very, very seldom, with somebody who has been indoctrinated to the extent that they have been, will they go to the Anglican, Methodist, Presbyterian, Baptist congregations, whatever. Disgruntled members of any religious organization in the world, once they get kicked out or they're told to leave, they're the ones that run down that movement. And most of the stories that they tell you about the movement cannot really be accepted 100%, unless they're totally unbiased. And that's very difficult to find in society. So even sometimes we have to be very cautious of what we say as ex-Christians when we leave Christianity and become Muslims. That we don't just talk nonsense about Christianity and make up stories. We have to be honest of what they actually do believe, not just because we no longer Christians. We have to be honest. So we must be cautious what we do. So don't just accept somebody, say, why did you leave? Not that we won't accept them as Muslims, we're quite happy to. But ask them, why did you leave the Jehovah's Witnesses? What was the reason? And if there's no kicked out, then you've got to have a little bit of skepticism, like, okay, what type of conversion is this going to be? Not that we have the right to question it, but just keep that in the back of your mind. Try to help that person get a right understanding. Like I said, these days it's very, very seldom that somebody gets kicked out, even if it's a really serious crime. They don't get rid of them in Jehovah's Witness, they actually keep them on. So witnesses are taught that they need to avoid all contact with somebody who's been discommunicated or excommunicated from the church, and that their spiritual life depends on staying away from these people. Like I said, very seldom does it actually happen. After a period of time, the person who's committed the serious offense, serious enough to be kicked out, they will have to go through the steps of rejoining Jehovah's Witnesses. Remember, the word Jehovah's Witnesses means God's witness. So they'd have to be re-witnessed to. And a period of time will have to go by to make sure that they are actually practicing properly. So they wouldn't have the benefit of being part of the congregation. So they'll have to prove that they can do it on their own. And then if their behavior is adjusted, then they'll be allowed back into the society. And all the steps that are required for you to be kicked out or brought back in are written out and dictated to by the Watchtower Society in their literature on how to do it. So if you wanted to find out more about it, you could probably Google it, and you'll find out information on what is required for an excommunicated Jehovah's Witness to come back into the fold. So there's literature that they've written on that and steps how to do that. When a person is expelled, he is still expected to continue to follow and pray and do everything else, but just not part of the fellowship. So he's excommunicated, but not that far excommunicated. But the general populace is not supposed to deal with him. The Jehovah's Witnesses believe in separate teachings compared to the rest of Christianity. Like we said before, they are all on their own. It's a one-man show. They are not part of the World Council of Churches. They claim they didn't want to be. It wasn't the fact that they didn't want to be. It was that this World Council of Churches didn't want them in it. So it's very easy to say, well, we don't want to join you when they were never invited in the first place. So it's like if you're going to get invited to a function, you say, well, I didn't want to go anyway. It wasn't that you didn't want to go, you just weren't invited. So the Jehovah's Witnesses don't belong to the World Council of Churches. They're not invited into those, simply because the Jehovah's Witnesses believe in a mixture of scriptures outside of the Bible, which they claim they only follow the Bible, but the very fact that they listen to prophets, which is their prophet who started off the entire movement, they might not call him one, but he was one, because they follow his teachings and his interpretation over the biblical narrative. So the Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the Bible has condemned every other religious group in the world, whether they be Christian or not. And every other religion in the world has missed the mark. The question that you can ask when you're doing dawah to a Jehovah's Witness is, why is it that for 1,900 years or so, the whole world had corrupted the message of Jesus and only you guys managed to figure it out in the last 100 years? And they're going to be very happy you asked that question. And they're going to go, well, let me explain to you. You see, people interpret this, and then you, after they're giving you a long explanation, say, wow, That is amazing. That's very, very good. You know, what happens if you found out that the last 2,000 years that you've been living, that you've been following the wrong information? Because Islam has a very simple solution for you. This is your opportunity, because now they've just spent the last 15, 20 minutes running down the Bible, running down the interpreters, running down Christian history, running down all the founders of all the different Christian religions, and saying they were the only ones that figured out the light. It now gives you a front door access to explain to them about Islam and say to them, just like you, we saw exactly the same thing. Just like you, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was born into a world where he realized everyone was interpreting the scriptures wrong. But except he didn't take 1,900 years to figure it out. So it's an opportunity for you to let them rattle off all the errors and all the problems and what's wrong with all the Christian denominations and how terrible and corrupt they are. And then you go in with the message of Islam, because they opened that door for you to go in. So dawah is about, remember, we taught you about listening skills. Why not always tell them, let's listen to what they need, what they're saying. They will give you the right direction to go. We can give you formulas like, if they say this, what you're going to say. If they do that, what you're going to do. But because dawah is situational, you're not always going to have the opportunity for that sentence to come up. And I'll explain to you a little bit more about that when we get back from having the short break, inshallah.
Peace TV presents.
Allah says, if you are in doubt, produce a surah somewhat similar to it. This is the challenge.
Verify.
Do they not consider the Quran with care? Had it been from anyone besides Allah, anyone besides Almighty God, there would have been many contradictions.
Examine the evidence.
It can be verified and examined. That time, it can even satisfy today. It can be verified and examined even till the last day.
The message for all humankind.
The Quran has the concept of ummah, that's the nation, of the whole humankind.
Dr. Zakir Naik speaks on Is the Quran God's Word? In Truth Exposed, starting from this Thursday at 9 p.m. and repeat telecast at 7:30 a.m. UK on Peace TV.
In every job that you do, you want to be the best that you can be. To be the best that you can be, you have to follow the example of the best that ever were. When it comes to da'wah, there is no better example than the example of those men whom Allah chose to do the best of jobs. His noble prophets and messengers. Join me, Muhammad Tim Humble, as we study together the methodology of the Prophet in da'wah.
Rush to adopt the matchless qualities that make the procedure of dawah extremely effective in the methodology of the prophets in dawah. Next on Peace TV.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We'll continue looking at Jehovah's Witnesses and how they understand and see things. We were saying before the break that when we are talking to Jehovah's Witnesses, they believe that they're the only right religion. Every other religion in the world from the beginning till now has misunderstood Jehovah's plan for them. And so this is the opportunity for you to agree with them and then to offer them the same message that they're offering everybody else. They're saying that everybody else has got it wrong because they didn't understand the text and they corrupted the text. It's your opportunity to show them how, yeah, you're right. And this is why in Islam, we have a text that hasn't been changed. We don't change the name of God. We don't change the names of the people. We don't even change the names of the Prophet Isa, peace be upon him. There's no person by the name of Jesus that ever existed. So this is very, very important opportunity that you can use when they say, wow, we are separatists, we don't want anything. Say, yeah, we agree with you 100%. You're on the right path on that. And then it opens the door for you to speak to them more. So they see the whole world as very, very dangerous and corrupted and controlled by the devil. And they see all faiths as dangerous. They will not sit. When one of the questions that was asked, brother asked the question and said, why don't they debate us? They see everyone, even sitting with someone of another religious group discussing their religion, would be a work of Satan. You cannot do it. They'd walk out and would not even talk to you. They will give you tons and tons of literature. However, they won't even take one piece of paper that you have written for them on maybe 1 or 2 verses that you want them to check up. They will not take it. If they do take, they'll throw it outside, but they're not even permitted to take that from you out of your hand. They are strictly told never to even take it. Even if they take it to throw it away, it's not permissible. They're just not allowed to take it full stop. Might be unfair, but that's the way their religion has taught them. So they believe in strict separatism. Sometimes the accusation has been made against Islam that we are separatists. We're not separatists, we're inclusive. We include all different societies together. We want a culture where Christians and Hindus and Buddhists and everybody can live. But we still have the right to preach just like they have the right to preach. So we're not having an exclusive society where we're not including the rest of humanity. So Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the highest allegiance that they can have is towards God's kingdom. That's towards Jehovah. And so they have absolutely no link to anything that happens in the human terms, like government, politics, anything like that. They do not celebrate any holidays. For example, Christmas and Easter and any political holidays, birthdays, any holiday, full stop. Because they believe, correctly so, that these are innovation. Correctly so. There's probably the only thing I agree with the Jehovah's Witnesses on is the understanding of the fact that all these celebrations, all these nationalistic holidays and all these other holidays are based on things that will actually distract you from what you should be doing. There are so many holidays in my country. It's a country full of holidays. There's a holiday for everything. If you do something, they turn it into your day holiday. And then it's another holiday that's added. So holidays and celebrations are considered to honor people and to honor governments and to honor flags rather than to honor Jesus, so they don't celebrate them. So they stay away from everything. They feel that these customs all are pagan and in origin are pagan, which they're very correct on. If you want to know more about Christmas and Easter and all those stories, you have to watch Peace TV, where I did a program on all the public holidays. So witnesses are told that they need to stay away from people who celebrate this. So they never hear them saying Happy Easter, Happy Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Independence Day, anything like that. And yet when we tell Muslims, they think we're crazy. Yet they're the ones who don't do it themselves. We should take a feather out of their hat. And we don't agree with 99% of their policies, but on the celebration of holidays and all the rest of it, they're 100% correct. When we ask Christians, where did you get this permission to do these things from? They can't show anywhere. So it's unfortunate that the story I gave many years ago, it's like having a cake. If I had a nice big, big juicy cake, whatever your favorite one is, maybe you like Black Forest cake or fruit cake or whatever it is, and I put 1% cyanide in that, would you eat it? And all of us would immediately say, not a chance, because you don't know where that 1% is. Has it been distributed the whole way through the cake? Is it just in the one piece? So you wouldn't touch it, even though only 1% is like that. The other 99% is fine. Now, the problem is, when we look at the Jehovah's Witnesses, 99% of the cake is poisoned. Only 1% isn't. So we can't agree with them. Most of their doctrines and most of their beliefs are Johnny-come-lately ideas. They don't actually come from the text itself. So we rather leave it. Even if there was 1% doubt, we still must leave it. This is more or less the reason how we feel about the New Testament. And there ain't 1% wrong with it. There's a lot more than one. Some defenders of the Christian faith, those who write apologetic books, will say that, I don't know what the Muslims are carrying on about. Only 2% of the entire Bible has problems with it. And that's 2% too much. If you take 2%, if we think of the fact that in Russia, Only 3% of the Russian population travel outside the country as tourists. We're talking about millions of people. So just because it's given as a percentage, don't just accept and go, oh, it's only 2% or only 3%. That's a small number. You need to look at that in real life numbers. Is it 10,000 errors? 50,000 errors? How many errors is it? 3% is 3%. 2% is 2%. Put it into numbers. So be cautious when people say to you, only 5%, only 1%, only 3%. Ask them, what is that in real numbers? How many errors is that in numbers? Because statistics are very, very easy. When it suits people, they say, oh, there's only 10 errors. And when it suits them, they say, it's 0.01% problems. So be careful what you disbelieve when they say it. Jehovah's Witnesses, no singing of national anthems, no saluting flags, none of that as well. They reject certain medical procedures, like blood transfusion, even if the person is dying. If it's their wife, their husband, their 5-year-old child, 14-year-old son, they rather have him die. They will not give him a blood transfusion. And it's because of a very, very bad theology that they haven't understood what the book that they're reading says. So in Leviticus, where it talks about not taking blood, it talks about not consuming blood orally, not putting it into your veins. So they will let somebody just die. They don't care, no matter what it is. So we are not to eat blood. What happens with blood when it stagnates? It gets all sorts of parasites, all sorts of toxins in it, and it will kill you. So the digestive system and the intravenous system are very different to each other. When you go to a doctor, he is allowed to give you an IV. When you go to a medic, he can only give you IM, intramuscular injection. Medic is not permitted to give you directly into your vein because it has to be somebody who knows what they're doing. So there's a big difference intramuscular injection and intravascular injection, intravenous. So when you're getting an IV injection, it's different. It's going to a different part. You get a muscle injection, it's very different. So we have to understand that the idea of this whole blood transfusion thing is very confusing. Sometimes they also say it's because of what happened in the Old Testament where Cain killed Abel and his blood cried out from the earth. Some people say that the life itself is in the blood. So Jehovah's Witnesses have a number of these combinations that they might feed you. They'll give you one of these versions of why they don't take blood transfusion. Jehovah's Witnesses don't accept blood, they won't give blood, they don't donate blood, no matter what the circumstances are. There are many cases that people have taken, like their mother or their father to court, or the father has taken some other member to the court who are actually Jehovah's Witnesses because of this, or even doctors or governments that have taken Jehovah's Witnesses to court. Maybe some of them have even been sentenced because of killing. There are different groups within Christianity, just like there are those groups in Buddhism, also don't believe in taking blood or giving blood, and that's their choice. It's not like we are computers, we're all not allowed to think. We're allowed to make choices, as long as they don't go against the Sharia, as long as they don't go against Islam, as long as they don't go against the Sunnah or the Quran. So you have a lot of scope where you'll find the Jehovah's Witnesses no such thing. There is suppression of thought, suppression of speech, suppression of voicing your opinions on anything. They're not permitted. There are many, many, many failed prophecies within the Jehovah's Witness movement. I'm not even going to go into them. There are so many. They happen so many times. You can get long lists from the internet of all the failed prophecies. In 1997, Jehovah's Witnesses started to change their policies, started to water down some of their policies. And today we find that it's very difficult to see their teachings as they were back in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They've actually started to become closer to the Protestants, the rest of the Christian community. I think the reason they've done this is for survival. There's all sorts of rumors about Jehovah's Witnesses that we have. Most of them are not true. Easiest way to do dawah to a Jehovah's Witness is to speak to them about the textual reliability of the document that they have. If you can prove scientific errors, historical errors, if you can prove to them that people had it wrong for 1,900 years, then they're more than likely going to listen to your suggestion on how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ understood the errors even back in those days. So be very gentle, be very slow, and make sure when you work with Jehovah's Witnesses that you compliment them on the things that they are doing, as well as correcting them on the things that they're not doing. So it's a combination of both. Well, that's all the time we have for this week, and that's the end of the show for the Jehovah's Witnesses. Next week, inshallah, or next time we're together, we'll be looking at the Seventh-day Adventists, inshallah. So from me, Areeb Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.